Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, you're a little under the weather this week. Kind of like the Bengals were on Sunday. It's might have to put you on the PUP list or IR or something, and we'll kind of recalibrate this Bengals season from here on out. The Bengals obviously lost on Sunday, really, really tough loss to the Houston Texans, and now have to turn right around and play the Baltimore Ravens, who are still on top of the AFC North, and have to face them in a Thursday night game. Jay, I don't think we're going to touch on this Houston game too much. We're doing our recording a little day later this week, and we've got this just massive Thursday night game that we honestly could not overstate the importance of this game anymore. So I think we'll be brief on this Houston game. What were your thoughts on this game? To me, it was kind of the same story that we've seen in other games, right? Where the Bengals jump out to an early lead and then go into this huge lull, and on defense, they give up explosive plays. They can't stop the run. Kind of seemed like deja vu all over again, right? And you add in CJ Stroud already looking like an elite NFL quarterback, and this is kind of what you get.
Yeah, a lot of it was deja vu. We've seen that before. They scored the opening drive, then they go 5 straight possessions with punts. That looked familiar. The explosives have been a problem all year, but that was a whole nother level. I mean, 17 of them. There's only been 2 other games where teams gave up more than that since 1991, and they weren't the Bengals. That was the highest that the Bengals have given up in that time. The one thing that was, I guess, kind of stood out was the Burrow interceptions, because you don't see that from him a lot. And, the throw to Sample down the seam was an aggressive throw, but it was the right read. He just sailed it a little bit. And maybe a more athletic tight end is able to get up and get his hands on that ball, whereas Drew wasn't. And then the one that was really kind of concerning was the one in the end zone. I mean, it was a first down. It's one of those ones where if it's not there, throw it away, live for another play. He thought he saw one thing and it ended up being another. And I mean, you think about that either one of those they convert, that they probably win that game. Still remarkable that they came back and tied it even after those 2 interceptions. The Tyler Boyd drop is rare. I wrote about it. He's got one of the lowest drop rates in the league since Burrow arrived. But I have no doubt that if he caught that pass and it was a touchdown, that CJ was going to take him right down the field and get a touchdown instead of a field goal. I mean, if you remember, right, Houston just kind of was like feeling out that drive. They're like, how aggressive do we want to be? And they were running the ball and they were taking the play clock all the way down because they didn't want to give the Bengals a chance to get the ball again. And if they were in total go mode there, needing a touchdown, I don't have any doubt. Yeah. I mean, their last 2 passes on that drive were explosive plays, both over 20 yards. It was just CJ Stroud was able to do whatever he wanted. And you don't see that a lot from a Lou Anarumo defense. It was pretty concerning.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of the Titans game, right? Where against the Texans, you're seeing Noah Brown go just wild. Like, how can that happen? Noah Brown, I mean, anyone that plays fantasy football knows Noah Brown's not exactly, he's a blocker historically. How is he getting open for all these catches? Just like against the Titans, you got guys like Chris Moore just like running free down the sidelines. How can that happen? I think part of the issue was just not a lot of pressure against CJ Stroud. Noah Sam Hubbard. There just wasn't a lot of pressure generated on CJ Stroud. And as much as you can like the group of corners that the Bengals might have, you can only hold up for so long, right? I mean, sure, they had losses in the secondary. They had coverage busts and stuff like that. But I think the problem was they were just asking to held up for too long. You have to be able to get into Stroud's face. That wasn't happening. I think Devin Singletary, 30 carries for 150 yards. The Texans were bottom 5 in rushing success rate in EPA heading into this game. They have not been able to run the ball all year. Even when they had Dameon Pierce, their regular starter, available, they couldn't run the ball. I mean, I think that's pretty concerning to allow a guy like Singletary, who's a decent running back, and the Texans do have a pretty good offensive line that's getting healthier, but that's concerning. I mean, you're allowing these not only the explosive plays, but this like consistent chunk yardage too. That's letting these other offenses keep the ball. So I think it's incredibly concerning, especially when you're going to look at a team like the Ravens, who we know can keep the ball and control the ball, create explosive plays. I mean, I think the Texans are a good team, and like I think the entire league is kind of being surprised at how quickly D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud have turned this thing around. But I think talent-wise, you still have to see that the Bengals are a much more talented roster, which makes this type of loss all the more disappointing. especially given the troubles that the Bengals have had in the AFC elsewhere, right? I mean, this
Mm.
game could come back to bite them when it comes to playoff time. The Texans are in the playoffs right now if the season ended today, and the Bengals are not. The Buffalo Bills are not. It's, who expected these type of results? I certainly didn't. So this is the type of loss that I think that can come back to bite them at the end of the season, and we'll just have to see if it does.
Yeah, you can't overstate the importance of the absence of Sam Hubbard in that game, because not only did it limit the pass rush, but he's one of the best run defenders for a defensive end there is in the entire league. And I mean, a lot of those explosive, when I say 17 explosives, the definition from the stat side I use is 12 plus runs, 16 plus passes. And a lot of those were those 12 or more yard runs. I mean,
Mhm.
Singletary was gashing them, and it's a concern because it's the exact same thing that they're going to see with Houston or with the Baltimore, because Baltimore
Mhm.
can run the ball like that. Lamar can extend plays, and the defense, if they're not plastering, you're going to have guys running wide open. And the one difference where it gets even harder against Baltimore is CJ Stroud had no intention of running the ball. When
Mhm.
he rolled out, his eyes were down the field the entire time, waiting for somebody to come open. That's not going to be the case with Lamar.
No.
If he sees green grass, he's going to go. So they have got their work cut out for him this week.
Absolutely. And I think before we get into that game too, we had some huge news in the AFC North just this morning. I woke up
Yeah.
to this news that Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns quarterback, is out for the rest of the year. He's undergoing season-ending shoulder surgery. It's obviously been just a disaster of a season for the Browns from a Deshaun Watson standpoint. Their defense is playing at an elite level. They have a better record than the Bengals. They obviously beat the Bengals earlier this season. But now they're going to have to turn to PJ Walker. Deshaun Watson has been dealing with this right shoulder injury all season long, and I guess it's finally been too much where he's going to have to undergo a procedure. So it's going to be PJ Walker for the rest of the season. I mean, I don't know how much that shakes up the AFC North. I'd like to say it shakes it up a lot, but Deshaun Watson has really not been very good. He's had a couple moments here and there where he's looked like that quarterback that we saw with the Houston Texans for years, but for the most part, I mean, I think PJ Walker's maybe been the better option this season. I don't know if this changes your view of where the Browns stand. I mean, I think everyone always thought they were going to kind of ride or die based on how their defense played.
Mhm.
I don't know. Does them not having Watson change your view of the Browns for the rest of this season?
Yeah, it does, because you look at some of those games they won when Watson was out. They were playing some pretty bad teams.
Hmm.
Um, when Watson's not been in the game, the Browns' other two quarterbacks, Dorian Thompson Robinson and PJ Walker, 1 touchdown, 8 interceptions.
Yeah.
I don't, when the games get big and the moment's big and all that, I can't see them riding this out. And they're in a good spot. We're
Yeah.
6-3 right now. So and they're at home this week against a horrific Pittsburgh offense. Maybe they figure out a way to win that game and go 7-3. It would take an ultimate collapse after that to not be in the mix. But
And
I don't.
they've got the Broncos and the Rams after that. I mean,
Uh,
the schedule kind of works out. They've got the Bears later this season. Like the schedule is kind of in their favor, but
yeah,
I do know what you mean. It's hard to kind of see them making their way back to the top.
the Broncos look a little different now.
They do. They do.
So and maybe the Bears will too when Justin Fields gets back.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's a huge blow for them. I, I I was on a Baltimore podcast yesterday, and they asked if I thought all four teams would make the playoffs, and I said no. And
Yeah.
my pick for the team that wouldn't was Pittsburgh, but now it would definitely be Cleveland, even though they've
Mm.
got a nice little buffer there. But if they do lose to Pittsburgh this week, then 6-4, and it's just you can see it kind of spiraling.
Yeah. It's it's hard to overstate like how big this weekend is going to be in the AFC North with all four teams
Yeah,
playing each other. I mean, all four teams within a couple of games of each other. I mean, this will redefine the standings in the division. I mean, this is absolutely huge week. Let's go ahead and talk about that Baltimore Ravens Cincinnati Bengals game, which is I feel like every week we're saying this is the biggest game of the Bengals season, but I mean this one
this really is. Yeah,
this really is. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than this. If they lose this game, I mean, I'm not saying they're out of the playoffs if they lose this game, but it's going to be incredibly challenging, right? I mean, if they want to have any chance of taking over the division too,
right.
which is getting much more unlikely by the week, they have to win this game.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the thing is I don't think they can win the division if they lose this game.
yeah,
They
absolutely
they would
not.
be 2 games behind or 2.5 games behind, which would really be
Yeah,
3 because Baltimore would have the season sweep and that tiebreaker. They would be 1-5 in the division, 0-3 or in the conference, 0-3 in the division. It's just you're basically talking about winning out to have any chance of winning the division.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, they have to win this game if they want to win the AFC North. So injury wise, so T Higgins, Sam Hubbard, Andre Yoshivas did not practice on Tuesday. Hendrickson was limited.
Yeah.
For the Ravens, Marlon Humphrey did not practice. Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle. John Simpson, the left guard. Kyle Van Noy, one of their best test rushers, did not practice. Um, I think those offensive line injuries are interesting because I mean that's a starting left side of your offensive line that might not be available this week for Baltimore. They do have good depth. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league, but I think especially if Sam Hubbard isn't playing, the Bengals are going to need all the help they can get, and the Ravens being without two of their top offensive linemen will obviously help that. What are your thoughts on this game, Jay? Just initial thoughts. What are you looking for when the Ravens are facing the Bengals on Thursday?
Well, first of all, I noticed, and I thought it was rare. I looked up how rare it is. This is Baltimore's third straight home game. I mean, you don't see that a
Mm,
lot. And so I went and looked to see how rare it is. And there are 7 teams in the league this year that are benefited with that have play 3 straight home games. It's the Ravens, the Bills, the Jaguars, the Rams, the 49ers, and 2 other AFC North teams, the Steelers and the Browns. So every AFC North team gets 3 straight
oh
home games this
man,
year, except the Bengals. So all the conspiracy theorists out there that think the NFL office hates the Bengals, there's more fuel right there.
and
Uh,
add that into the coin flip situation from last year, and
yeah,
we got a
exactly.
full blown conspiracy theory here.
Now the Bengals did just in 2021. They got 3 straight home games. They've had it. I looked it up. They've had it 16 times in their career. So it's not like crazy odd, but it is a
Yeah,
weird tweak. Um, so it's a big benefit for Baltimore here. They're 1-1 in this stretch. Um, for me, they got to take care of the ball, as that is the case in most games. But I see it being low scoring, even
mm,
though the Bengals are capable of putting up explosive plays. Anybody that plays the Bengals is capable of putting up explosive
yeah,
plays, as we've seen. But it just doesn't, it never works out that way. Yeah, the week 2 was 27-24, but this game is more likely to be, low 20s, high teens. Um, Joe Mixon did not look good against Houston. There was
no,
a number of runs that he should have had 2 or 3. There was one
he left
where
a lot of yards on the field,
yeah,
a lot of yards on the
the
field.
expected yardage on that run was 9 and he got 3. It was just one of those kind of days where he's not breaking tackles, he's slowing down. Makes me wonder, the Jets cut Michael Carter
Mm,
yesterday.
hmm.
And when I was at Senior Bowl in 2021, I was talking to a Bengals source, and he said they love those guys that come out of college as a split back. And remember, those Michael Carter and Javonte Williams were
Yeah,
both
sure.
like co-lead backs for North Carolina, and they loved Michael Carter. It didn't work out where they drafted him, but they clearly liked him then. Now he had a great rookie year. He's fallen off, but I
Yeah,
do wonder if that's someone they would put in a waiver claim for. He's not
yeah.
great in pass protection, is what they've been looking for, but he would give some juice and as a receiver out of the backfield, as a runner. Um,
That's an
so
interesting one. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, I
yeah,
think, and he's going to be on the waiver wire, so it'll be a question of where if any teams ahead of the Bengals are put in a claim and are interested. So
mhm.
I don't know. They won't have to like compete in free agency with him. I'm assuming he'll get claimed. I mean, he's on a
Yeah,
very cheap contract. I mean,
yeah,
teams
rookie
need,
deal.
teams need running backs. That's an interesting one though. I could see him being kind of an interesting piece to add to this backfield. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the Bengals are right around because at 5-4, they're right
Yeah,
around the middle of the pack. So odds are someone ahead of them will probably put
yeah,
in a claim. It'll be interesting to find out if we can, you know, we'll we'll obviously find out who got him, but
yeah,
it's always interesting to see what other teams put in claims if the Bengals actually did.
sure.
Um, but yeah, back to the game. I think that's the thing is if it looks like that again, where they can't run the ball at all,
Yeah,
like they did against Houston, then that just puts even more stress on Burrow. And I wrote about it last night that he's had these games where he's torched the Ravens, but then he's had these games where he's just been beat up, where his jersey was almost green that first game he played there in Baltimore because he was knocked down and sacked so many times.
Mhm.
But since Mike McDonald came in last year, all three of those games, there was not a lot of offense from this Bengals team
Yeah.
against the kind of the new look Ravens. So again, they're not going to have T. They're not going to have Yossi Voss. So the offense is going to be a little limited, and it's going to come down to what it's kind of been a lot of this year. It's if the Jamar and Burrow show is lighting it
Yeah.
up, they've got a shot. And if it's not, if the Baltimore sells out to take Jamar away, Bengals are going to have a really hard time moving the ball and scoring.
And I do wonder how the Bengals offensive line is going to hold up too, because the Ravens, they've gotten a lot of sacks this year. They've gotten a lot of like
Most in the league.
true sack production. But if you look at pressure rate and pressures and stuff like that, they're actually not at that high.
Right.
So I think they've kind of, it's a combination of getting a little lucky, but it's also, I think, just the scheme where they're running a lot of sim pressures. They're doing all this
Mhm.
games up front where, maybe they're able to get to the quarterback even if they're not generating a lot of just pure pressure production, because they don't, it's not like they have like a classic number one pass rusher. I mean,
Yeah.
Jadavion Clowney is their number one pass rusher.
Yeah.
Kyle Van Noy is like their second best pass rusher, and he might not even play. So I don't think it's a situation where you're having to block like a Myles Garrett type or a TJ Watt. It's more of like the aggregate, right? The collective that you're trying to figure out where's the pressure coming from. So I think communication is going to be really important for this offensive line.
Yeah.
Handling stunts and twists, which we've seen this group have a lot of trouble with at certain points this season and over the past few years. I think that'll be really critical. Like you said, I think that the Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase seems like that's the Bengals plan every game, which, in some regards, why shouldn't it be? But it's kind of the only thing that they can rely on. If Marlon Humphrey doesn't play, I think that's obviously good for the Bengals.
Mhm.
Then again, the Ravens just have all these guys who maybe they're kind of anonymous. They're not stars, but like they get put in these positions and they just do a really good job. Geno Stone, safety for the Ravens. Anybody could have had him for $1 million this offseason. He's leading the league in interceptions this year. He
Yeah.
could be a first team all pro. I mean, how does that happen? I think
Yeah.
Mike McDonald will absolutely be a head coach next year. I mean, I think that's what we can kind of the takeaway here is that he's done an outstanding job. I don't see this going. We've seen the Ravens have those games against the Lions and against the Seahawks where it's just an absolute, destruction, where it's not even a game. I don't see that type of game. I do think the thing about the Ravens is they do get out to these leads, but then they kind of give them away in the fourth
Yes.
quarter, and it's interesting. I wonder if the Bengals could take advantage of that. Whereas the Bengals have been this team that when they get up early in the game, they do play really well.
Mhm.
Coming back, it just hasn't happened this year. They have not been able to make these comebacks. Maybe they show a little life at some point during the game, but they just can't get over the edge, at the end. I don't know. It's kind of those kind of conflicting kind of narratives for these teams. I wonder how that works. But yeah, I do see a close game. I can't imagine this will be one of these games where the Ravens are up by 30 in the fourth quarter, and I certainly don't see where the Bengals could be up by that much later either. I see a tight game too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point about the scoring early, because that has been the Bengals' MO here recently. They've scored on their opening drive in 5 straight games. The
Mhm.
first time they've done that since '85, and scoring in the first quarter period, they've done it in 6 straight games. And I looked it up. If they can do it against Baltimore, get any kind of points in the first quarter, that would be the 7th straight game. That would tie for the second longest streak in franchise history. Um, Still a long way to go to the record is 15 by the 2014, 2015. It kind of bridged those two
Yeah,
seasons. But that would be huge to get a lead, to get up on the Ravens and play from in front. You don't feel as bad if you don't score first and you have to play from behind because of Baltimore's history, giving up these leads. But to be on the road, I don't know if you're ever going to take that crowd out of it, but if you can
Mhm.
get up and score and just kind of maybe temper them down a little
Yeah,
bit, it would be a huge help. And they've been so good at it. I'm really interested because of that. It seems like this might be a game where if they win the coin toss, they take the ball. They try to
yeah,
get the lead early. But then again, when they play Baltimore, the possessions are at a premium. You might
mm,
only get 7 possessions in a game because they just churn that clock.
sure.
And maybe the chance to double dip between the halves would be more valuable. I'm really interested to see if
Yeah.
they even win the toss, what they'll choose to do.
Yeah, that'll be something to watch, I think, right off the bat. Um, we're gonna do a little ranking for you. We're gonna play a little game for you. We've got five scenarios, five things that could happen on Thursday night. And Jay and I are gonna rank them and see which we think will actually happen and which are the least likely to happen.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
they're not just things that could have. I put this list together as things that probably won't happen. But and it's not like 90 to 10. Maybe it's a 51 to 49 chance. But
yeah,
all of these things happening are long shots,
yeah,
or at least uh, not the favorite. So we have to pick
yeah.
which one is most likely to actually occur.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna make sure I don't mess this up because I
Yeah.
read my answers in the incorrect way. So we'll go ahead and list off the five things we're going to be considering here, so you can follow along. Number one, Bengals hold the Ravens to under 100 yards rushing. Number two, Trey Hendrickson is active. Number three, neither kicker, Evan McPherson or Justin Tucker, will have a 50-yard field goal. Number four, Bengals will have more explosive plays than the Ravens. Number five, Bengals win. Jay, you want to start? What do you think is the least likely to happen tomorrow on the game?
Least likely to happen is neither kicker has a 50-yard field goal. I
Okay.
just the Tucker history, the McPherson. I mean, those are two of the best long range kickers in the league, and someone's going to hit one either in the final minute of the first half or maybe they'll both hit in the final minute of the first half or in the final minute of the game. It's insane to think that there will not be at least a 50-yard field goal in this game.
Okay. I actually have that as my number three.
Ooh.
So I'm assuming you meant a convert. Do you mean an attempt or a make? Because
A make.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I had as well. So I think that I have that number three. Justin Tucker's only made one 50-yard field goal this season.
Hmm.
And McPherson's made five, but he's only attempted them in 4 games. So I had that as third only because I think both these teams will be aggressive in terms of fourth down conversions tomorrow night. I mean, Baltimore has a long history of being one of the most analytically friendly teams in the NFL. I think if you're in that position on the field in that 30-yard range, I think there's going to be a lot of going for it on fourth down where they might not be in a position to kick those 50-yard field goals. But these two kickers can obviously hit them if it comes down to that. My least likely, I actually had the Bengals holding the Ravens under 100 yards rushing. I don't know if anyone saw Keaton Mitchell play yesterday, but that guy is very good. He looks like Devin Achane down in Miami. I mean, it's the same type of thing. It's like, give this guy the ball, and it's a 60-yard touchdown. It's unbelievable. Baltimore has 100-yard rushing in every single game this year. They're first in rushing efficiency. They're third in rushing success rate. They've got a good stable of backs. Even if they have offensive line injuries, they still have a good offensive line in terms of depth and replacements. I just see them getting to 100. I don't want to say easily, but like relatively easily, whether that's on a big explosive play or just like consistent gains, keeping ahead of the sticks. Either way, I think they'll get to 100 yards.
Yeah, that was my number 4. Lamar's always had this chip on his shoulder about being more of a runner than a passer. And I could see if he's moving around the pocket and trying to extend plays, that him being intent on kind of the CJ Stroud mode where he's gonna throw the ball and try to pick the Bengals apart that way. They're, the odds suggest there's going to be guys running wide open.
Yeah.
So I think it's a long shot. Believe me, it would be amazing if they held him under 100 yards rushing. But I do think that it's a slightly better chance than neither one of those kickers hitting from 50.
I do wonder if the Bengals are going to use like a true spy defender on Lamar in this game. If that would be something Pratt or Wilson would do, or I don't know. It's like, what if they have a specific plan to contain the Lamar threat? I don't know. I don't know if you have any insight on that and what they're
they've done that in the past.
Yeah.
It was interesting against Buffalo. They double spied Josh Allen a few times and used both Pratt and Wilson. A lot of times, not a lot, but I've seen Lou do this where he'll blitz his nickel corner, and it's kind of a half-hearted blitz.
Yeah.
Like he'll come in, but he'll break down like he's making a tackle as opposed to going right at Lamar and just kind of say, okay, I'm here. You're not getting outside this edge on this side. So there's a lot of ways to do it. But Yeah, I am just interested to see how that'll work out if they spy him, how often they spy him.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you've got guys running free in zone coverage, you can't afford to do the double spy thing.
No. Speaking of guys running free, I will give my number 4 most likely, which is Bengals have more explosive plays than the Ravens. I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm,
So my definition of explosive play that I looked up was 20 plus yards.
yeah,
Baltimore has 41 explosive plays this year, 31 on pass, 10 in the run game. Bengals only have 23, 20 pass, 3 runs. I just the Bengals have had trouble with explosive plays all year long. Whether that's just it could be in a number of things. We talked about the lack of pressure at some times. We talked about coverage busts, lack of communication in the back end. It just happens. I mean, it just happens. These big plays have been happening. It doesn't matter the opponent. It doesn't matter who the wide receivers are. It's been
right.
happening all season. You've got a guy in Lamar Jackson who is playing at a near MVP level, first round rookie, and Zay Flowers, who's looked I think he's looked really good, even if the numbers haven't been there. Complementary guys like OBJ, excellent tight end, and Andrews. I mean, I think there are too many options on this team to think that they're not going to have explosive plays. The Bengals, you look at, I think there's one guy who can create an explosive play.
Yeah.
I'm assuming T is not play, which neither of us probably thinks he will. They've got one guy who can really create those chunk yardage. So when you kind of look at it like that and the options and who can actually do what, I just don't think the Bengals stack up.
Yeah, I think TB could get a couple if they're really rolling everything heavy towards Jamar. He had the 64-yarder
Yeah.
Sunday to set up his drop in the end zone. He's had an explosive play in Baltimore before in the
Yeah.
2017 finale when he knocked them out of the playoffs. So I think he could be in that mix. And there's also a recipe for the way that the game develops, where if Baltimore does jump out to a lead and the Bengals are in catch-up mode, and then the Ravens are playing a little softer, I could see where maybe the Bengals get a couple more. Whether it's 16 or 20, whatever parameter you want to use for the explosive plays. I do think that if they get in that desperation mode, they could get a few. Whereas the Ravens at that point would probably be more likely just to pound the ball and probably not get those kind of explosives that way.
You never know with Keaton Mitchell, though. He
Yeah.
could break one off even when he's just trying to kill the clock, right? So my number 3 was the kickers and the 50-yard field goals. What was your number 3, Jay?
That was that one, the explosive plays.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. What did you have for number 2?
I had Trey Hendrickson playing.
Okay.
I mean, we'll find out here. It's, we're in the 11 o'clock hours we record this. I expect the injury report to be out around 2. I would think he would be questionable.
Mhm.
That it was good that he practiced last night, but we need to see how he came out of that practice. Was there swelling? Was there any kind of issue after he tested it that way? Remarkable that we're even talking about this as an option. I mean, the way it looked with him face down, slamming the turf with his hand, and it just looked really bad. And Trey's remarkable. I've asked coaches about this before, and they won't give him the credit. They say, "Oh, that's football players," but I've never seen a guy play through the stuff that he's played. I mean, that 2021 Super Bowl run, his back was killing him, and he'd come out for a few plays, go right back in. Last year, he broke his wrist, missed one game, and came back and played the rest of the way to the AFC Championship game with a broken wrist. Every time forget about just sacking every time he grabbed a quarterback, every time he tried to knock off a blocker, he was feeling that, and he just played through it. He's had neck injuries. He's really remarkable.
Yeah.
And they need him. I think if this was not a Baltimore game, then maybe they would give him another rest. But they really do need him. I think he's going to do everything he can to be out there. Further commend him. I mean, he just signed an extension. He got even more money this offseason. A lot of guys would say, I'm going to wait till I'm healthy. He's going to do everything he can to get out there, and I think they're going to find a way to make him active. I don't think he's going to play his regular snap load. I think they're going to manage him a little bit, but I do think we'll see him suit up.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive. I mean, he's more than financially secure. He has great standing on this team. He doesn't need to play. He doesn't have anything to prove. But the fact that he continually gets out there despite these injuries and getting banged up is really impressive. I had actually had that as my number 1 that he will play. So I think, I mean, he was limited yesterday. We'll see how it looks today. But you kind of went over it. He is an incredibly tough player who. I just think if he doesn't play, I think this game is obviously going to be a tough game either way. If he's not out there, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Cam Sample and Miles Murphy, could they get the job done? Maybe. It's not going to be anywhere near the level of production that Trey Hendrickson can put up. So I
Could
think
be
that
the I was gonna say it could be the Joseph Osai
it
rebirth
could
game.
be. It could be. You kind of forget about him. He
Mhm.
hasn't made a lot of production this year. Hasn't really done anything. You kind of forget he's even on the depth chart. I would love to see it. I would love to see him get the opportunity and kind of deliver on what we all thought he could do this year. So I had that at number one. So then obviously at number two, I had the Bengals winning. You had that at number one then, Jay.
I did. And real quick, back to Trey. He
Yeah.
had my favorite moment of the week. And you and I were talking about this before we started the show. Where yesterday there was NFL Network and ESPN and Amazon, and these guys, national guys, come in with this legal pad of all the names they want to talk to in the locker room. There was nobody in there. It was Jermaine Pratt, and there was nobody in there at all because normally the locker room is open after practice, and so they're all in there. They have to
Yeah.
they have to take their pads off and shower, and they might say no, but you still have a chance to walk up to them and ask. They do what they did yesterday when the open locker room is during the lunch period, they just sit in the cafeteria where we can't go. You don't even get a chance to ask them, hey, you got a second? So on Monday, everybody knew what Trey had the injury, and he came out of the training room and he was walking into the shower, and Ben Baby asked him, he's like, hey, Trey, any chance you'll talk? And Trey said, zero. And it's never great when you get turned down, but I just
Yeah.
I just thought it was hilarious, and Ben did too. It was a great response, and it's kind of who Trey is.
Yeah.
A lot of times he's always like no, 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 and then you never know. He'll just turn around and talk, and he'll be terrific. And so
He's
we'll
not
see.
divulging anything ahead of this game.
Yeah, if he
Yeah.
plays Thursday, he's going to have to talk in the locker room afterward because
Yeah.
that's going to be a heroic effort. But yeah,
Right.
I have Bengals winning as my number one because I mean, I don't think it's likely, but it's not a crazy thought. I mean, their backs are against the wall. They've got to
Yeah.
do this. They have typically played pretty well in Baltimore. They have this horrible streak in prime time, 14 straight under the light losses. But the one of those was last year at Baltimore in
Mhm.
week 5. And Zach talked about how, yeah, that is significant because they just saw it. They felt that atmosphere. It's the familiarity of it is not quite as much as walking into an unfamiliar place in that kind of situation, and those night atmospheres are so much more intense.
Yeah.
But they just went through this. They took the lead in that game with less than 2 minutes to go, and then they couldn't hold it. The Ravens went down, got a last second field goal to win it. So yeah, I think it's that's of all the things on this list, I think that's the most likely to happen. But I'm still not tipping my hand on my prediction
Okay. Well, we're about to get that in about 2 seconds, so you can tip your hand if you want. Yeah, I've got Bengals win just to say is my number two, just behind Hendrickson. I think it'll be a close game. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get to our predictions and bets. We've kind of transitioned into that anyway. I'm going to take the Bengals in the points. So I saw 3.5 was the last spread that I saw. I'm going to take the Bengals in the points, but I'm going to say Baltimore wins 26-23. And I hate to say that for Bengals fans, but I just think, Baltimore coming off a really devastating loss, and I know the Bengals are too, but you look at some of these advanced metrics like DVOA, and the Ravens are through 9 weeks were one of the best teams in like NFL history. I mean,
yet.
that it's hard to say because they're not like this star laden roster maybe that has a ton of like high profile guys outside of Lamar, but between their kind of glue guys, their complementary players, the coaching staff, their aggressive mentality, this team is just really, really loaded. And I think a home game for the Ravens on a Thursday night, coming off this really devastating loss they had on Sunday. I don't think they're going to lose, and I hate to say that for Bengals fans, and I do think it'll be close, but I just think a 3-point game with a Ravens win is probably how I see it.
What did you say the final was? 26,
26-23.
23. All right. I'm right with you in
Okay.
the margin. I've got Bengals or Ravens 20, Bengals 17. I have a saying I like to lean on, and it's never bet against the trend. And 14 straight losses in primetime road games is a trend.
Yeah.
And The last time they won a primetime road game was at Philadelphia in 2012. They snapped an 11-game losing streak with that win. They've lost 25 of their last 26
Oh
road
my
primetime games.
god.
It's insane.
It's so
So yeah, I just, I can't. I've picked them every game this year.
I was gonna say the first time you've picked against them, right? Yeah.
Yes. But I can't. I'm not saying they're not gonna. They can't win.
Yeah.
But I just, it feels like this is going to be one of those late rip your heart out losses again, and going to be some soul searching time on their weekend off before they get back and turn around and play another division game against Pittsburgh next week.
Yeah.
We went a little out of order. We forgot our bets.
Yeah.
And I don't want to not do that. Although we still,
No, I know we have to do this.
Brian didn't send him in again. I just
Brian's out. Brian's out of the competition.
Oh no, I said still need picks, and he just dropped him in. So that's very good.
All right, good.
So if we go back to last week, because the reason I was so eager to bring this up because I won both of my bets last week.
I know why you were eager to bring it up.
You and I both went over on the Bengals game, and that hit.
Yep.
I had Dallas minus 16.5. That hit. You had Atlanta -1 against Arizona. Didn't get that.
It did not work.
Brian, Jets -1.5. Won that interesting but not great Sunday night game against Vegas.
Yeah.
Or no, they lost that game, didn't they? Yeah,
no, they
Vegas
won
that game. So he went 0-2.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. So, okay, he is down now. We're all under. He's at -10 in the lead. I'm at -22, and you are at -40.
Okay.
You can turn it around in 1 week.
All right. All right. So now that you all want to take betting advice from me, I will give my pick of the week. I'm gonna go with a big spread. You went with a big spread last week, and you won that. I'm gonna go with not quite a big of a spread, but I'm gonna go with the Dolphins +12 at home against the Raiders. I know the Raiders have won 2 straight games, but they played some really bad teams. Dolphins. I just don't see how this Ravens offense can stop this Dolphins offense. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 40 burger, a huge number. +12. I'll take that every day.
-12, right?
-12. Sorry.
Yeah.
-12. Yes, -12.
Okay. And then what's your Bengal bet?
I'm just gonna take the points. I'm gonna take the points
at +3.5.
+3.5. Yep, that's what I'm gonna do.
All right. I like I said, I could see this game going either way.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna bet the line. And I'll have to look it up because I don't know if they're posted yet. I'm gonna go with a Mark Andrews anytime touchdown. He just finds a way to do that against the Bengals, and if they're struggling to plaster, he's a guy they'll get open in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good bet. And then I'm just not sold on the Chiefs. So I'm looking forward to that Monday night game big time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go Eagles +3 for that one. And then Brian weighed in with he's going to go Panthers +10.5. And again, I can't remember who they're playing. You have the schedule there in front of you.
They're playing the Cowboys.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that one, but
I don't know about that either.
And then it was almost like he read our minds. He did a 6-point teaser. He's taken the Dolphins down to 6 and the Eagles up to 9.
Oh, okay. So, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I feel a little better about our picks then. That's good. Yeah, it's tough going back to the Bengals Ravens prediction. It's like we're not saying they cannot win, but it's like a 52-48 in my mind, right? A 52% 48 call in my mind. It's just, and if we're having to make a score prediction, I just think the Ravens are just that much better. It's not a big gap though. So I'm incredibly excited. I think this will be a great game to watch, and just a great weekend. We talked about it before that the AFC North will look entirely different after this weekend. It could look entirely different. Maybe it won't. Maybe everything will go as planned and it'll look exactly the same. But Bengals could make a huge jump this weekend if they win this game and a couple other things go right. So massive implications on Thursday night, Jay.
Yeah, because they're gonna be favored next week against Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
and so they do find a way to beat Baltimore, and then they can beat Pittsburgh. All of a sudden, now you're talking about them being 7-4, 2-2 in the division. It changes everything. Houston's a distant memory. So this is a huge swing pivot game because we talked about it earlier, how it almost buries them from any chance of winning the division. If they lose it, if they win it, they are right there.
Yeah.
They are one of the co-favorites if you ask me if they win this game.
Yep, totally agree. Next week, we'll be back at our usual Tuesday time to recap everything from this weekend. Thanks again for listening to the PFN Bengals podcast. Come read all of our stuff at profootballnetwork.com. Give us a like, give us a review, give us a subscribe, do all those good things. We will talk to you next week. Thanks again for listening.